Hey there, welcome back to another video. This time around, it is my review of the 2022 horror film, The Black Phone. Now, The Black Phone is a film directed by Scott Derrickson, and it's based on a script by Scott Derrickson and C. Robert Cargill, and that script is actually based upon a short story, which is also called The Black Phone by Joe Hill, Stephen King's son. Now, The Black Phone is a film that I remember honestly being intrigued by ever since the trailer debuted. It looked like a film that could be genuinely interesting as well as potentially chilling. And I will say that it does have a lot of intriguing elements to it, and I do feel that it does have some chills, but it's one of those movies where I did wind up liking it, but it still didn't live up to its full potential, so that was admittedly a little disappointing. Scott Derrickson's direction is definitely not one of those things, though, that was inconsistent or something that didn't live up to its full merits. His direction was as dynamic and as solid as ever. I think Scott Derrickson is a really good director. He showcased his talents in Doctor Strange, in Deliver Us from Evil, and various other films. And here, his direction is rock solid. It's very effective when it comes to moments of suspense and thrills and even dramatic sequences that are intending to be a little bit more emotional. And yeah, I thought the direction was really good. There were some moments too where he was ambitious and very inventive with the camera work in terms of the way that he uh, moved the camera around or with the use of certain techniques like a certain kind of zoom or a particular way to pan the camera around. Some really genuinely great standout direction by Scott Derrickson. The screenplay by Derrickson and C. Robert Cargill also has some really big highlights. For instance, I really loved the way that this script wrote the two main characters. The way that this script wrote Finney and Gwen was fantastic. I thought it was grand. I thought it was definitely some of the best work that I've seen when it comes to characters that are around this age. It didn't really feel too juvenile, but at the same time, it was a script that didn't really shy away from these kids being kids. And I really felt the script just gave these very talented actors so much to work with in terms of bringing these characters to the screen and just making them so endearing and so likable. So when they get wrapped up in this terror and one of them gets taken by the grabber, it's something that really does maintain some genuine suspense because of the fact that you really care about these characters and you want them to make it out alive, or you want them to be able to be reunited with one another. The brother and sister characters are just that strong. And I also feel it did a good job showing the grabber as a presence that was a force to be reckoned with. But it could have done a better job doing that, but it still did a good enough job that the grabber definitely felt like someone that you did not want to meet. You did not want to run into this guy. He was definitely someone that brought a certain sense of intensity and terror to his presence. I also did really enjoy the fact that the phone is a conduit for these spirits, for these lost souls, these kids who were tortured and killed by the grabber in the past. I like the fact that they all band together to help Finn uh, escape and get revenge. I really like that idea. And I thought for the most part the script executed everything involving the spirits very well. I think it had a good amount of variety to these spirits and the way they introduced themselves, which really made those scenes all the more captivating and intriguing. In particular, I like the fact that one of the spirits is just some asshole. He's a total jerk off, and he was that way when he was alive, and he's still that way when he's dead. And I thought that was a nice change of pace. It was refreshing to see a character like that in this kind of story still be the same. You didn't have this stuff where he learned a lesson or he changed his mentality. No, as soon as Finney's like, thank you. Thank you for helping me. And he's like, helping you? Fuck you. I like that. That's a nice shift when it comes to these kind of stories. And I like the way that the script really set up the order of these spirits. It saved his friend, the most recent kid who was kidnapped, other than Finn or Finney, and they saved him for last so he could be the one to really be there for Finney and to really give him hope and to give him some much needed motivation to be able to stop the grabber's reign of terror and escape with his life. I also feel the script just absolutely nailed the importance and the connection that Gwen has not only with her brother but with the grabber and with everything that's going on because of her psychic visions. I feel that the script just absolutely excelled when it pertained to her and how important she is in terms of finding where her brother is, let alone bringing the grabber to justice. I don't think that some of the stuff involving the grabber's brother, for instance, was really that well done. And especially Gwen and Finney's father. I don't feel that character was much of anything other than a setup or a cutout, so to speak, or a standee for abuse, for an abusive alcoholic father cliche. And I get why he's there. It's to create a parallel between him and the grabber, because the grabber also likes hitting kids with a belt, and to show that, oh, you think the grabber is the only horror that these kids will interact with. No, there's also horror at home. I get it. I understand that, but it's a pretty overused trope. And on top of that, I don't really feel that the arc of this father character was really that well executed. I didn't buy the fact that he was that remorseful or he really was sorry for what he did. It just felt very forced, and I didn't buy it at all. And I just didn't feel it was needed. You didn't need an abusive alcoholic father character in this movie. It was already intense enough as it is. And speaking of intensity, I did mention that the grabber felt like a genuinely threatening presence, and that is true. But I also feel the grabber didn't quite grab me or hook me as much as I think the character could have, because of the fact that it tended to not really show a lot of what he did. It left a lot of his torture and everything that he did to these kids up to your imagination. And I get why Derrickson and one of the other writer might have decided to do something like that. I don't know why my cat is freaking out in the background. I apologize. Maybe he also is a little disappointed by how the grabber was written in this movie. Um, but yeah, I feel it really should have shown a little bit more of what he did. Not everything, because then it would become exploitative, or it would ultimately be desensitizing. But something. I mean, you see some aftermath of these spirits, and you see what they looked like after they were dead. So you see some of that, like they're all beat up and they're bleeding and so on. But I just feel it lacked a certain visceralness that I really feel would have made the grabber just hold on to the viewer more and really stick with them. And I think that would also help the film feel much more like a horror movie. I think that's another issue that I do have with this film. It's marketed and it's set up as a horror film, but it's not a traditional horror film at all. It's more of a suspense thriller about a child killer and this one victim, this one kid who's kidnapped, and Finney, and his tall task to try to escape his clutches with the help of the spirits of his victims. And that's not necessarily a bad idea. And I think there are moments where it really does click, but the grabber just doesn't really grab you as much as the character could have if you saw a little bit more of his torturous exploits. Also, the mask stuff, I don't think it was needed, and I know it's there for the marketing and it's supposedly creepy, but it did nothing for me. It just looked like Japanese war masks or something, the kind of stuff that you would see from Japanese mythology, and I think that's definitely the intent. But there's no real explanation for why he's wearing these masks, what they represent. There's some things here and there where it's like, oh, he wears the mask because he doesn't want people to see who he really is. So when the mask gets taken off at some point, he freaks out and covers his face. Okay, but that's very brief and there's not really a lot there. Speaking of not a lot there's not a lot to this character of the grabber. You don't really get to know that much about him, that much about his backstory, that much about his upbringing or why he's doing these things. He just does them. He likes to play games with these kids and he tortures and kills them and he wears these masks. And to be honest, I thought the character was more scary when he was just wearing white face paint and a top hat and masquerading as a magician and try to trick these kids into going into his van. That was more creepy to me than the stuff with the masks. But that's just me. And there are some moments, because of the fact that it's not as visceral as it could be, because it's kind of predictable at times in terms of the flow of the story and how things ultimately play out, and the lack of consistent strength when it comes to other aspects of the narrative. For instance, the stuff with the investigation and the police isn't really as engaging as the other uh, uh, arcs in the story. So when you start focusing on that stuff, well, then the film starts to kind of slow down a little bit and has some pacing problems. But despite my issues with the film, I still think the script is relatively solid. It just could have been spectacular and really good if there were more things that were added to it, or if you had a little bit more of certain elements, if you had more visceralness. I really think that's something that it was lacking. And I think some of the issues also stem from the fact that this is a short story, and the writers had to stretch it out to become a feature length film. So they had to add some things and add some extra stuff that didn't necessarily always work. Something that did consistently work, though, for me was the performances by the cast. I mean, Mason Thames was terrific as Finney. I honestly thought it was one of the most impressive young child actor performances I've seen in a long time. I thought he just nailed every aspect of this character. He was sympathetic when he needed to be, and believably so. Like when he feels like it's a lost endeavor, when he feels like he has no hope left, and he's just breaking down in a corner and crying. That was very genuine. It was authentic. I bought those emotions. When he's strong and he's standing up for himself and fighting back, that felt very equally as believable. And he had a certain charisma and personality and charm to him that just made him very likable and made the character likable and really made everything that he was going through even more strong, because you really like this character, you like this actor, you like his performance, you like what he's bringing to the role, and he makes it so much his own that you really feel for him and you also root for him. It's something that a lot of modern horror has been lacking as of late. A lot of these characters that are just cannon fodder, they make these characters as unlikable as they possibly can so you can root for them to die, but instead it just becomes one of those things where they become tiresome, and yeah, you do want these characters to die, but you're no longer really connected with the story, and you're not connected with these characters, so you're not really rooting for anything. And here with the grabber, I mean, not with the grabber, I mean this story with this performance, the Finney's actor Mason Thames brings to the table, you do root for him because you connect with him on a deeper level. Madeleine McGraw was also magnificent as his sister Gwen, another really just strong, great performance from a young child actress. I thought she had really good chemistry with Finney. You bought that they were brother and sister, and she had her own spunk, her own charisma that really did shine through. She had a bit of a foul mouth, but she said her lines in a way where it was genuinely funny. She was funny, and she was also believably headstrong and kind of badass at times. Ethan Hawke as the grabber, he was definitely an intimidating presence. There were some scenes where you were genuinely terrified of this guy. Like when Finney first initially tries to escape and he's running down the road and he's screaming for help, and Ethan Hawke gets him. He gets him back and he's got him on the ground and he says, "I'm going to gut you. If you scream, I'm going to gut you." And like the way that Ethan Hawke said that line, it was very effective. It was very chilling. I just wish that Ethan Hawke had more to do. I wish that he was given more screen time. I wish that there was more for Ethan Hawke to showcase in terms of the inner workings of this character's demented mind. And also his torturous and just absolutely depraved exploits. I really feel that there was something missing there. It feels like Ethan Hawke really could have established himself as just a very memorable horror character, and instead he just, there's just wisps, there's like fleeting flashes of that potential that is not fully realized. And that's not Ethan Hawke's fault, because he did the best that he possibly could with the little bit that he had, but it's still something that I felt was noticeable. I mean, it's also something that ties into the narrative. Well, it does tie into the narrative and the issues I have with it, but it also ties into the marketing for the film. All the posters feature Ethan Hawke's character with his masks, and it seems like he's going to be the focus of it. He's going to be in it a lot, and that's not really the case here. Jeremy Davies as Terrence. If there's anyone in this cast that didn't really bring their A game, it's Jeremy Davies. I didn't really feel that this performance was that impressive, especially compared to everyone else. Compared to Mason Thames and Madeleine McGraw, whose performances were so good. It was honestly some of the best child actor performances since the first season of Stranger Things for me. And Jeremy Davies was just bringing TV movie of the week stuff. I just didn't really feel that the performance was that much of anything. Nothing that really stood out. I guess at best it was average, but it definitely wasn't anything that strong. Like in the scenes where he's supposed to be emotional and you're supposed to maybe sympathize with him a little bit because of what happened with his wife, it doesn't really register the same way as it might have with a better actor. E. Roger Mitchell, though, I liked as Detective Wright, as well as Troy Rudeseal as Detective Miller. There were some other actors I definitely did like Miguel Cazares Mora played Robin, Finney's friend, who is a total badass and beats the shit out of this bully, and is a big fan of Bruce Lee, and also Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I really liked that character, so it made what happened to him even more tragic. All the other actors who played and actresses who played the Grabbers victims, they all did a good job. I also didn't mind Rebecca Clark as Finney's crush. But yeah, Spencer Fitzgerald as Buzz. I think he played one of the bullies that was going after Finney. Yeah, the victims. Robin, played by Miguel Mora. Tristan Pravong as Bruce. Robert Fortunato played a cop. Jacob Moran as Billy. Brady Hepner as Vance. Banks Rapetta as Griffin. Yeah, those were quite good. James Ransome, he played Max, who is the Grabber's brother, who's all coked up and everything. And that was a performance that was kind of as well. It seemed like he was trying to play it more comedic, and I don't think that tone really worked for the movie, at least not in the scenes that he was in. But yeah, like I said, for the most part, the performances are pretty solid across the board. It's also well shot by the cinematographer Brett Jukowitz. There are some really striking sequences that showcase the Grabber and his masks and his dungeon and all these other sort of things. In particular, I thought the way that Gwen's visions were shot, I thought that was really quite something special, as well as the other different sequences when you would see these physical embodiments of the Grabber's victims, but Finney wouldn't see them, he would only hear them. And I thought the way that those sequences were shot was also quite good. Of course, that all ties into Scott Derrickson and his style and his approach for the film as well. But I've always felt that a cinematographer and a director, they are in a lot of ways tied into one another. They're connected at the hip. And everything really flowed very well when it comes to their collective vision. It's also well edited by Frederick Thorvall. The music by Mark Corvin. The score wasn't really much of anything. I will say that about the movie. The score was pretty forgettable. Mostly one note. The kind of typical sort of like droning background, creepy music. Nothing really that spectacular. Um, I would say the music that stands out more is songs that were used for the movie. The film picked a lot of 70s classic tracks for the soundtrack, and for the most part, those really did work well with the movie. And speaking of 70s, I feel the production designer and the art director and the costume designer, like everyone just did a remarkable job bringing that era to life in a way that felt actually genuine. Unlike some of these other movies where they're trying to be a throwback, like this actually felt like a genuine throwback to the era of the late 70s. Did a great job with the aesthetic and just really nailing it and making it something that felt very immersive instead of the opposite, which you see in a lot of films that take place in the past, in other decades. It has a running time of like 103 minutes, and at times it does drag a little bit. I will have to admit that. But for the most part, I was relatively entertained by it, relatively enthralled. There were a lot of things about it that I thought were absolutely excellent. And I would say it's definitely one of the better films that I've seen this year. And yeah, it's a film that doesn't quite live up to its full potential, but it doesn't really wind up having too many hang-ups either.